start each session by discussing some books that we've read over the past year and having conversations with authors who join us about their books. We're very privileged to have the opportunity to have conversations with authors whose work shines a light on some of the trials and triumphs of people from the Black communities across the UK and the diaspora. We're going to be starting our book club discussion, focusing on 2 books. The first one is Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, and the second book is Bad Love by author Maame Blue, who's going to be joining us in conversation later this evening. So our book club loves to talk about the covers of books, so I thought we'd start with discussing the cover for Children of Blood and Bone, as per usual. So I've got my book here with what I think might be one of the characters in the book, Zaylee. So Children of Blood and Bone is a West African inspired novel. It's a debut novel by Tomi Adeyemi that takes us to the fantasy world of Orisha, based on, I believe, Nigerian sort of setting, or West African, heavily influenced by Nigerian setting, architecture and culture. What do you think of the book cover? I believe this is Zaylee, who's a Magi. What are your thoughts of the book cover? Did it make you want to go out and get this book? Did it make you a bit more intrigued why she had white hair?
For me, it made me think about the genre the book belonged to. So seeing that character with the hair being white and reading the back, or at least having some idea of what the story is about, makes you think of it as some kind of, well, not quite science fiction, but certainly fantasy, with groups of people that depiction may or may not be important in understanding how they fit in the general structure of the whole story. But yeah, it certainly made me interested in finding out how that character would fit in with the rest of what was going to happen.
Thanks, Peter. I think it made me think juju when I saw it. Magic. That's what came to mind when I saw the cover. But I probably had heard a bit about the book, and then I saw the cover and I thought, oh, juju, voodoo, sounds interesting.
I did find the cover quite intriguing, but I could not differentiate it by race. Unfortunately, because it kind of looked a bit Indian, like the Indian headgear thing they wear with feathers and all of that. And then the lady's face wasn't completely visible, and it just, the features were in there to either decide if it's like an African book. So if you take away her name at the top, it could really throw you off. You might not be able to just make up your mind if it's something to do with African writing or African heritage. It made me want to read the blurb a bit more before deciding if I could read the book. So yeah, but it's still intriguing. It's a beautiful cover, actually. I loved it.
Thanks, Dorothy. And then the book itself, what did you make of the characters? So I think the main characters we meet are Zaylee, and then Amari, who's the rogue princess. We then meet Inan, and I think Zayn, who is Zaylee's brother as well. What did you think of the characters in the book? What did you think of Zaylee to start with, Zaylee's character? I thought Zaylee was fierce, but didn't always give a lot of thought to her actions. So she would, she had really good intentions, but I felt that she was, had a short fuse compared to her brother Zayn, and she would do things and then maybe realize that she could have done things in a calmer way. But then, and again, I think she's quite young. She's a teenager I believe. So her actions sometimes were a bit erratic, but very fierce. And I thought such a beautiful character to portray in her book. Anyone has any other thoughts about Zaylee's character? Did you like Zaylee? Or does she have to grow on you?
Sorry, I think that because they're I know you described her as erratic, Mary, but I think as teenagers, because they're teenagers, they are very much trying to function in an adult world, and they're erratic because they're just what's the word I'm looking for? They're quite eager and quite zealous.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that's the reason why they behave in that way.
Yeah, I agree with both Mary and Patricia actually on that. I think that the fact that she was impulsive made it a little bit difficult to always agree with the choices she made, but I guess as a lead character, it also meant there was scope for her to grow and for us to get to know her better as she went through the journey of learning new things.
And isn't it her impulsiveness that makes the story, that carries the story? You know, trying to win, you know, they're all trying to win adults' approval, and very much like teenagers today, correct?
I think because I listened to the podcast, and I think I still need to go back and read the book again because it was really interesting. But the person who did the reading or the voiceover did an incredible job to demonstrate her impulsive nature, you know, how overzealous she was. I think it was really clear from the sort of expressions and how it was read. And that's how she grew on me, because I started by being frustrated of her reacting without, you know, checking how much danger she's putting everyone else in. But the reader just carried me along, and it felt really interesting to just listen to, you know, her character and her behavior. So yeah, not quite sure. But
I have to say it's a very good audio read, this one. And you know, just the voice is so lovely, and you know, and you know, you feel the excitement and that impulsive and erratic nature as it's being read, and it's conveyed through the text. So I like that. I must admit, I did enjoy listening to this more than I did reading it.
I do agree with both of you. The audio version was awesome, but I read and listened to it at the same time, because I just, sometimes when you listen, you don't get the spelling of some of the places. So I wanted to make sure that I got the right pronunciation of some of the places, but also the spelling as well. But yeah, the audio version is lovely. Going back to what you were saying, Peter, about Zaylee's character, I think I'd say with Amari's character, you could see development. You can see the book's written in such a way, as Dorothy was saying, she found Zaylee quite frustrating at the start of the book, but towards the end, you can see that they've grown and developed. And I think that's such a great thing for writers who have that skill, to be able to help you see a transformation, how events change people. Because I think at the start of the book, Amari as well, who's the rogue princess, starts off very, she's supportive of the cause, especially when her help, Binta, gets killed. Sorry about the spoilers, if anyone hasn't read it, there will be spoilers. But yeah, she decides to support the cause because she's not happy with what's happened to Binta, who she's had a really close relationship with. And we see Amari at the start of the book very, maybe subdued isn't the right term, but very a quieter person. And towards the end, she's not as still feisty. Sorry, I'm just going to switch someone's video off. I'm not sure. Okay, so she's not feisty per se, but I think Tomi Adeyemi uses this character to show different types of strength. Zellie's very, you know, physical, and, you know, she's got a short fuse. And then Amari seems to be the type of person that stops, thinks things through carefully, and then reacts. But I felt that towards the end, I could see a big change from Amari's character, who was quieter, to Amari at the end, you know, dressed in her royal clothing, and towards the end fighting, you know, against a cause that she believed in. So I thought really nice. Certainly a page turner, because you just kept wanting to find out what was going to happen next. And, you know, the writer kept you, and, you know, in suspense at times. And it's so rare that you read a book that you just keep thinking, one more page, I just have to know what happens. And I thought this was one of those books, a really good page turner. But yeah, going back to the characters, Amari and Zaylee, it's nice to see how the characters evolved in the book as well. So really well written. What about, what did you think of the this world of Orisha that Tomi Adeyemi created? I think magical that she had all that in her head, and, you know, putting it down on paper is just incredible. And I think it based on real facts, loosely based on facts, is also incredible, and some of it quite authentic.
I really like that aspect of it. I think the whole myth making or mythology making is based on some truth. The only thing that I was a little bit concerned about, well, actually, first of all, because in listening to audiobooks, you often find the pronunciations of words and place names very weird, especially if you have some idea of these real places. In this one, it wasn't quite the same. It felt very authentic and was easy to follow. But in terms of the actual book and the ways that the zones within the land was structured, because these are real places, it was throwing me off with the actual geography of Nigeria, because east wasn't quite east. And so I would typically think of, they're going north, but that's not north in the reality of Nigeria's geography. And so I was a tiny, tiny bit confused by that, and it would always take me out of the story a little bit. But I mean, as long as there is that context where you are aware that the land of Orisha isn't quite Nigeria in as much as it has all of those place names, and it doesn't end up overtaking the actual geography of Nigeria, then it's easy to relax into it. I mean, I think that in lots of ways, it was brilliant. And once you get the idea of what each of these worlds are, then you can follow the story. But then with the world of Orisha probably blowing up if there's a movie made, it might be a little bit confusing for people who are interested in the actual geography of Nigeria to see how they've put places that aren't quite in the correct place there.
I do agree with you, Peter. That's actually for people who know the geography of Nigeria, that's going to throw them off. But I mean, taking, for example, me, who has very limited knowledge of Nigeria, I was quite intrigued how she could weave fantasy into a real life place. And in my mind, everything she was saying geographically, that to me was Nigeria. So it was still so appealing. I didn't know the difference at all. But I can get where you're coming from, Peter. And I think a lot of Nigerians will be like, what? You know, but I didn't see that difference. I was just enjoying the story through and through. Yeah. Go ahead, Mary, you're showing something on screen.
I was just trying to share. I don't know if it's visible. The land of Orisha.
So it does look like there is a map provided in the actual book. I only happened to listen to the audiobook, which meant I had that context missing. But I mean, it still makes sense to me. It's just a by the way point of the reality of a place versus the mythical land that also seem to share a lot of place names. But yeah, it's neither here nor there. I really liked the book. I liked how she was able to make different distinctive characteristics of the places, and of also even just the protagonists, the different people. So Amani, Iman, Zayli having very unique personalities that you could either see evolve through the story, or at least expect some kind of action from them. And maybe some of the story just involves them changing their mind or doing something out of the ordinary. But yes, it's very strongly written.
I agree with what you said, Peter, and I think it's so nicely written that whilst you're reading, as a reader, you don't confuse the different voices. So you know that this is, the book is structured in a way that, she tells you that this section is for Amari, and this section's for Inan, and this section's for Zayli. But sometimes as a reader, you can get a bit confused if there are multiple characters with strong voices, with the voices blending, but that didn't happen. You could clearly follow, Zayli's character, Amari, and Inan as well. And then the other characters that came in along the way, like the king and the king's wife, and then a few other characters as well. There was an interesting scene that I quite liked, but it's quite a brutal scene. So maybe I don't want to share that bit. But yes, it's written so well that each character's voice is distinct, and each character really drives this story along and makes it so interesting. Speaking about the characters, what did you think of Inan's character, Inan and Zayli? So at some point I was like, are they going to have a relationship? I thought they hated each other. That bit in the book I wasn't too sure about, but what did you all think of the pair of them? So Inan was basically meant to, Zayli was meant to be an enemy because she was a threat to, the throne, the royalty. But at some point I wasn't quite sure what was going on. But then I don't know whether that was just their powers, in Orisha, or the Magi had all these powers to be able to influence other people's thoughts, powers over death, powers over health, powers over air, water. I can't remember all the different types of magic that they had, but it seems that either, I don't know if I got this right, Zayli could almost think, she could visualize what Inan at some point was thinking or doing, and vice versa, because of the magic.
Well, it's been a while since I read the book. It's been almost 2 years, so I'm just going to see what I remember. I don't think I ever...
We can't see you, Sandra. Your video is off.
No, I'm so sorry. My apartment's a mess.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I was saying, I never fully trusted Inan. I thought that he was too invested in the royalty and what being with someone who had magic would result in. But I thought when he started to develop signs of magic himself, that may be a reason why he would abandon what he knew and go the way that Zayli was going. But I did like the fact that there were no... I think she stayed true to everyone's character, and the way things turned out was true to who Inan was, who we had been introduced to in the book. There were no sudden changes. No, we could see why he would behave the way that he did in the end.
Inan's character was quite ruthless, wasn't he? I think when they were younger, his father put him in a duel against Zayli, and he had to either, fight her to death or something. And I can't remember which parts, but I think earlier on in the book they had this duel, and he actually did hurt her. So he's quite mercenary, is what I think of Inan.
But yes, I also agree with what you said,
Sorry,
Mary,
not
about
Zayli, Amari.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, with Amari, but with what you said about there being that suspenseful thing in the middle where there was will they get together, Zayli and Inan. I think I don't know whether it was certainly deliberate to make us think one way, and without spoiling anything, obviously the character of Inan was maintained throughout. So what you thought at the start seemed to have been what you thought to the end, but there was definitely an ambiguity in as to whether or not when he became magical, or at least more obviously magical, whether he was going to switch his priorities from the throne to advancing the magical groups. Yeah,
It's also interesting that his sister never bought his whole change. You know, he was trying to present himself as a changed person who had his sister never bought it, and that's the person who was supposed to know him best. So that was a clue, and should have been a clue to Zayli as well.
but the thing was, I think Zayli didn't trust Amari, so it might have been the other way around. So she thought Inan rather than Amari was the more trustworthy person because of how she felt about him, perhaps.
True.
What did you think about the setting that she created? I thought it was whilst I was reading it, I felt like, got a free ticket to a completely different part of the world. I felt the book really transported me somewhere else. Did you feel that way whilst you were reading?
Absolutely. When you read the book, you just when you imagine what's happening as you read, you just find yourself in another world, and you're reading and trying to create those scenes and those places that she has created. And even the creatures, it didn't stop at the characters of the humans, but even the creatures she created. And it's very interesting trying to read it, and you're trying to say, well, is this a lion or an elephant, or what is it? So it was quite interesting. It wasn't just about reading, but it was also creating imagination in your head that you had to now fit in to enjoy the story. So you want to see the next, what's going to happen. Oh, these people that she's created, this new land that we're about to go to. But it's interesting to see their character. And like Peter said, if you know the geography of Nigeria, she kind of turned everything right side up. So she's talking about the Eastern people, but she's describing more of the Northerners in Nigeria. I'm like, what? But it's interesting. So I think that I think it must have been on purpose, so that you don't think, oh, this is Nigeria, this is fantasy. Just think about it that way. Don't create any country or any land. Just be in my own world, in my own space. And I think she did very well in doing that. Because Dorothy said, if you don't know the geography of Nigeria, there's no way you can place it. You just enjoy the book, create the lands, create the journey, follow her on the journey. And I think that map at the beginning of the book was very good, because when she talks about a place, you can go back and see, oh, how far they had to travel. Oh, this is where they are now. So it was really good. That was a nice thing to add to the book.
I agree with you, Yabo. I really enjoyed the scenario that's sort of changing, where we're in one place at one time and then you're in another place and you're imagining all these things in your head. And then I heard about a film based on the book, and I was thinking, this is going to be so much work for the producer. Who's even going to script all of this, and how would they bring it to life? I thought about Wakanda, and the whole idea about Afrofuturism, and how African culture clashes with technology and gives us all these incredible images and stuff. And I think I cannot wait to watch the movie, but I'm blown away. I don't know how they're going to do it, because reading the book, you're in so many worlds, and if we have to replicate that in a film, it's going to be one of the best things we'll ever see come out of African fiction. Yeah.
Dorothy, I totally agree with you about how would you put that into a film, but that's the great thing about this book, because it really stretches your imagination. You thinking of all these characters, and you're visualizing and creating a film in your mind as you're reading, and you carry on, you know, turning pages because you need to know what the next scene is going to be. It's not that often I read a book that is so engaging, and I found this book really was. And as Iyabo was saying about the animals, that was interesting as well, because she uses animals that are local to that part of the world. So you have cheetahs and lioneers, and there was an animal that transported Zaini and Zain, her brother, all around parts of Orisha. And I think that was so nice, putting the animals in there as well.
Can I just check, Mary, and I think any other person who knows Nigeria better, is there a place in Nigeria called Onitsha?
There is, yes.
Okay, was the name Orisha probably based on that?
That's interesting. I never did think about that.
No,
No.
it isn't. Orisha is the Yoruba word for God. Onitsha is an Igbo word for a place name.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It just sounded quite similar, so I was wondering if she just played with words there.
So you'd often find, even in Brazil or in South America or in the Americas, you'd have Orisha spelled with an X, Orixa. So it's from that word for God.
Like a deity.
Yes, exactly. So even some of the other divinities that each of the groups were supposed to be worshipping are all individually Orisha, but the land in this book is also called Orisha, just to tidy the whole thing up.
Interesting, Peter, that you mentioned Brazil, because I believe she was inspired to write this book while she was traveling in Brazil or somewhere in South America. And she started learning about the Yoruba culture, and people who had emigrated, the history of people who had emigrated from Western Africa to Haiti or South America. And that's how she got inspired to write this book. So it's interesting you mentioned that. And I never realized Orisha was actually a real word. I thought it was something she made up. I think it's nice that from the book, there are references to West African culture or African culture, like the clothing is really nice. And I love the way she also describes where they lived. I would imagine they would be like huts, but it sounded really, really beautiful. And I think it's lovely that writers like her paint a beautiful picture of what Africa is, because it is a really beautiful land, a beautiful place. And it's not just the beauty of the safaris, but also beauty of the culture, the color, the people. And I think she did really well portraying that in this book. It may not be completely authentic, like Peter was saying. I didn't actually notice the map straight away because I was listening to the audio version, and then I picked up the book. And I'm glad I did, because I did remember some of the geography and thinking, oh, I thought this part of Nigeria was over here. She sort of turned it on the side, as Iyabo said earlier. But still a really nice introduction to someone who hadn't really read anything from that part of the world, Western Africa. So I think so well written, because some of it is so authentic. Like she talks about the food. I think she mentions gele in the book at some point. The danshiki she mentions as well. So it's such a lovely way to be introduced to some of West African culture. She does that so well.
Yeah, I fully agree. For all I said about it being inauthentic, I think a huge part of it was more as being completely purist, but it's a young adult fantasy fiction. It makes sense that just introducing it in this way would cause people to be sufficiently interested if they want to find out the real thing. But at least presenting it in this way makes it accessible, but also exciting.
The other thing which we probably didn't discuss previously was about the magic and the gods. And I think she also touches on a bit of the religion of the people. I know it may not be authentic, but it's nice that she writes about that, and it makes you start to think about the people and their indigenous religions before Christianity came along or Islam came along many years ago. So a bit of history that maybe she's twisted it a little bit and added some magic, but some of it again authentic. So I really like that. So I was going to ask about, you know, the parallels between welcome, Dina. I was going to ask about the parallels between the world of Orisha and our world today. With last year, you know, we saw the tragic death of George Floyd, the pandemic, the inequalities with the disproportionate deaths of people of BAME background, you know, being sort of more represented with the deaths due to COVID-19. And I was going to say, are there parallels between the world of Orisha and our world today?
Okay, first. I think so. I mean, it's quite clear that even without last year happening, I think the parallels are drawn when marginalized groups are picked out either for their uniqueness or the things that make them distinct from the rest of a population, or even just a tiny minority. I mean, I think it's too clear to show. And also the way that the people in power were hunting down people they perceive as threats is similar either to bigger or smaller extents, depending on which country or which part of the world you're in. But you don't have to look very hard to find those examples in real life, whether it's anywhere in America or even in parts of Africa, even in countries. Also last year, there was the End SARS protest that was hugely popular in Nigeria, but then you had a very tiny minority who was trying to quash that kind of dissent, which is exactly or very similar to as happens in the book. So and not just in the Western world, but you also find parallels in other aspects, even in Nigeria, even in other parts of West Africa.
Thanks, Peter. I think it's fantastic that she's used such an incredible novel that's targeted to young adults, and adults I'm sure would enjoy reading it, to send a really strong message. As you say, you don't have to read too far into the book to really grasp some of the themes that she's exploring with this book. And I think a young person would enjoy reading this book, and it'll be a lot of food for thought for them, but not in a way, it's not written in a way that's very, it's written in a way that they'll still enjoy the book, but there'd be messages that they would want to, that they get from reading the book that they probably want to explore further, you know, and reflect on. So I thought really nice for her to write such a interesting and enjoyable book, but then you put in some very quite heavy topics that would, you know, make anyone think a little bit, as we were talking about the parallels between this world and our own world. And I think for a young person reading that, they may then think, okay, what's the next step? How do we correct this? How do we, you know, make things right or take steps towards making this right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's lovely when you read books that are entertaining and at the same time in their own way educative as well.
Mary, our book club was at school, that when they read this a while back, and they looked at the parallels of class and race, and I can't even remember half of the things that they were saying, but we looked at that, you know, that replacing class with race and the effect it has on young people. So we did look at it from that point of view. And one of the things I should have noticed when I read the book about it's a these female characters, they suffer so much trauma, but they persevere nevertheless. And so the book groups, my book group, they were looking at that as well. Something I probably should have picked up, but I don't like fantasy. Sorry, Yabo. So I didn't notice much when I was reading it.
Thanks, Patricia. I should just mention that our book club will be launching our junior or youth virtual Sunday book club next month, and Children of Blood and Bone would be an excellent book for some of the teenagers and the older children to pick up. So these will be children of medics who are in the book club and non-medics, and we'll be reading a variety of authors. So that's something exciting to look out for as well. So thoughts on Children of Blood and Bones. Would it be a book that you'd recommend to friends, to teenagers? And if you would, why?
I must admit, it was recommended to me by a teenager because they were trying to get me to enjoy fantasy because it's not my favorite genre. Mm-hmm. And I've read it and I've listened to it, but fantasy just does not grab me. But I would recommend it to teenagers though. I would definitely do that because of the many themes of conflict, trauma, the class or race aspect of it, the female characters in there, who I think are really lovely characters, especially Amari and Zayli. I think they're great characters, but it's just fantasy is not my bag. Sorry.
I think I'll recommend it to a teenager. And just like Patricia said, if fantasy is not your bag, it might be a difficult book to get into. But reading the book, I really enjoyed it. And if you're kind of very imaginative, which most teenagers are now, because they always want to imagine they're like invisible and can destroy the world. So I think it would be a good book for them to read and help them travel and probably help them with their own ideas as well, because I think it can spur a lot of thinking when you're reading it. You want to quickly create this thing that this character or this place that she's talking about. So I think it's something that they will want to read. And I did recommend it. My daughter started reading it, but weirdly enough, she said, oh, she got bored. So she stopped that somewhere. I'm sure she'll pick it up at some point.
I definitely recommend it. I enjoy fantasy, one of my favorite genres, and I have recommended it to people who also enjoy fantasy novels. I think that for people who, like me, never really grew up from reading fantasy novels like the Harry Potter books, I think if you enjoy something like Harry Potter, if you did that, lots of people who are now adults like me, but are still stuck in the world of Harry Potter. And I think this is a similar book for people who are growing up, in this time. I enjoyed it thoroughly, not just because of the theme, but the story had me spellbound. The characters themselves were very clear. I couldn't put it down until I finished. So yes, definitely recommend.
I was just going to say something similar to what Sandra said, because there is a whole world of Harry Potter, both secret and publicly admitted, like self-admitting Harry Potter fans. I'm one of these people, by the way, who love the idea of fantasy, but probably wouldn't have said that they did. Out of the ordinary, like you just need one book that helps you get into that world, and then you seek out more. So as well as it being teenagers, I think probably because of the way the story is set, it's probably early teens to begin with. Like if you're not already into it, then it's slightly later. But then there are lots of other things to enjoy about the book. The geography, the story, the teen romance, all of those sort of things that come with writing a book around this age, about these specific groups of teenagers, make it sort of interesting. I mean, I certainly recommend it to people who already enjoy fantasy, but also as a try to people who are at least interested in that part of the world and how it's depicted in fiction. So yeah.
I'll definitely recommend it for teenagers, because my daughter's not yet a teenager, but she loves anything African. Like, African stories to her are much more interesting. So if I sell it to her as in this is a fantasy, you know, story based in Nigeria, and I know she's going to read it because she loves all the sort of fantasy novels. But I think the reason I managed to read through this particular one, because I struggled a little bit in the beginning, is because I was watching a masterclass from someone called N.K. Jemisin, and she's like a fiction creative writer tutor on masterclass online. And the way she was breaking down the characters, you know, the worlds that were being created, the archetypes, it just made me more interested to see whether it was applicable to this book. So I was using the book as a case study to understand her masterclass better, and that's how I got my way through. So yeah, it's, if you're not a fantasy person, you're going to struggle. But if you do have the time to persevere, then you will really enjoy the book. It's a good book.
I would agree with all of you, but I would add that I'd recommend it to young adults, but I would definitely recommend that adults pick it up. I was really skeptical when this book was nominated in our book club, and I thought, I'm not really a YA fantasy reader, but it's totally switched me. So, you know, I'd say to people, be open to try books that are not within the sort of genre that you tend to read. And just be open-minded with books. And I'm so glad this was one of the books that I picked up, because, and that's the joy about being in a book club as well, is that you tend to, you know, encounter books that you probably would walk away from in a bookshop. And with this one, you know, I'm so glad that it was nominated in our book club and that we all read it and picked it up. It was such an engaging read, so well written. And I'd recommend it to everyone. And I would recommend it to adults as well, busy professionals who, you know, don't have as much time or don't read as much as they used to. This will bring up the child in you, and it'll just get you, your mind being a bit more creative and developing this world that the writer, you know, has created in your head as well. And it's nothing more fantastic than that. As Sandra was saying, it probably also brings out the big kid in you whilst reading this fantasy world. But yeah, it's very mesmerizing. I would highly recommend it to anyone, adult, young adult, you know, to pick it up. So how would you rate this book? For me, I'd give it a solid 5 out of 5.
It's a 5 for me too.
Yeah.
5. Yeah.
3.
Oh, I was about to say Lara's not here, so we're gonna get.
I'm so sorry for all you fantasy lovers. I'm really sorry. I've tried. I've read it. I've listened to it. I've read it twice, actually.
A solid 5 for me as well. I may be biased,
5.
but yeah, that's how I feel.
It's a 4 from me.
Oh. Peter, can I ask, was it the turning the map upside down?
I didn't even see the map because I listened to it on Audible. But it wasn't necessarily that. I mean, I think that probably essentially because it was a young person's book. Yeah, some of the beats in the story ended up being predictable, as good as it was, but more because I tend to read books like those, so I already felt like I knew somewhere, at least along the lines of where some of the storylines were going. So yeah, but it's still well written, so I've given it 4. So
Yeah, awesome. Okay, that's great. So on to another fantastic book, Bad Love by Maame Blue. And we're really lucky to have Maame join us today. So we're not going to have a traditional review, but we're just going to discuss the book and share our thoughts and reflections of Bad Love, and share some of the best bits in the book. And I wondered, when Maame joins us, if she could read some of the book as well. That'd be lovely to listen to her. So welcome, Maame.
Hello. Hi. Camera. Hi, everyone. Hey. Nice to see you all. Okay.
Yeah.
Hiya.
I accidentally knocked my camera off.
So you said you want me to read a bit?
Yes, yes.
Yep. Okay. I'm trying to find a bit that's not a, well, I assume you've read the book, so nothing will be a spoiler. So let me find,
So whilst you're looking for that, I will tell people that Bad Love was published in June 2020 by a great initiative by Jacaranda Books called 20 in 20 or 2020, which we'll ask Maame about a bit later after she's read.
okay, I will read. Sorry, there's a particular section that I'm looking for that I totally lost. Okay, yeah, so I will read from a section kind of later in the book where Akria, the main character, meets so the first guy that she was with, D, he's disappeared, and she meets another guy, J, he's called, and he is found it, there we go. He is a spoken word poet, and he's a teacher, and he is the opposite to her first love, D. And this is just the first outing that they have, just to give you a flavor, I guess. So let me see. So they've just gone to, she's just gone to a poetry show with Jay, and it's like a slam competition. So he had performed in it instead as well. So, right. We ended up attending the slam competition together, Shan having conveniently double booked herself. On the busy tube ride home, my ears still buzzing from all the poetry I had heard, Jay turned to me as we stood by the doors that linked one carriage to another. So you've not said, what did you think of tonight? I tried to keep my composure relaxed as I leant against the door, though I was too aware of how close he stood, holding onto the train via a metal bar to his left. I'm still processing. He looked at me amused, unsure if I was serious. Even me. I know I didn't win, but no, you were great. I just mean, it's like the words are still floating around my head, you know? He laughed and then suddenly moved closer to me, our faces inches apart as people squeezed themselves off the tube, struggling to step around us and all the other bodies out late that night. He smelled like cocoa butter, and I smiled in spite of myself. When the tube doors closed again, Jay only stepped back slightly, so that now we were closer than we had been before. So you're a thinker, yeah? I tipped my head from side to side, trying to decide if that was accurate. I mean, I guess. Yeah, you are. I shrugged, but stayed looking at him, at the deep green jumper that he wore over dark denim jeans and scuffed Nikes, all finishing off a look of cool nonchalance. The train jerked again, and this time we collided, his dreadlocks tangling momentarily with my braids before loosening themselves as more people exited the train. I hoped our stop never came, and then winced with embarrassment internally at how hard I'd wished for it. To my relief, Jay insisted on taking me all the way home, his residence just a 15-minute bus ride away. On the way, we talked poetry and life and moving through the city. I wished I could hold on to the depth of the conversation for later. Something close to the bone was being accessed by him, and I wanted to know how he was doing it, whether I should make it stop. But you write, don't you? I shrugged and was sure I felt him frown beside me as streetlights warmed our path, and I failed at trying to bring the conversation to surface level. He remained silent, waiting for me to verbalize things. I mostly just write as a sort of catharsis, to get stuff out. What stuff? The question came a millisecond after I finished my sentence. Honesty was knocking on my teeth, begging to get out. So I let it. Painful stuff, X stuff. Ah, yes, the X stuff. Yeah, poetry is good for that. Sometimes. Sometimes it's just hard. We stopped outside my front door. Maybe it's hard because you haven't got all the bad stuff out yet, or you're not over it. He was asking me a question without directly asking, and I wasn't sure that the true answer was what I wanted to give. I didn't want him to disappear too. Or maybe it's just complicated. Is that your thing? Complicated? I frowned and then searched for his fingers in the dark with my own, our hands clasping briefly, awkwardly, as he stepped closer to me and we stared at each other again. I willed him to move a few more inches forward, to kiss me so that I didn't have to think any more about what we were talking about, so that D could be erased from the moment and I could feel, or at least pretend to feel, like what I was doing was tantamount to moving on. But Jay just smiled softly, squeezing my hand before stepping away and walking sideways down the steps away from my flat. He waved goodbye as he backed away from me, now on the street, before disappearing around a corner. A minute later, I got a text message on my phone. We're going to see each other again soon, right? Smiley face. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Maame.
That's okay.
Just lovely to hear you read. One of the things I love about Bad Love is how poetic it reads. It just sounds so lovely, you know, when you're listening to it, because I've listened to the audio and also read it as well. So beautifully written and very poetic. The other thing I love about it as well, especially looking at bookshelves at the moment, is that it's quite unique in a, and it just tells a beautiful love story. It's very relatable as well. I think the last time we discussed this book, there was a lot of, you know, discussion about Emeka and Equia and Jay, and people sort of feeling like, you know, that wanting Equia to make the right decision. But to some degree, there's parts of the characters that you feel that you can relate to. And then it feels really contemporary. So it feels like you can, you know, this book is written for anyone going through, or young people going through these experiences today. So it feels really real. The characters feel so real. So well done. So, you know, beautifully written, poetic, contemporary, and relatable, and seems so relevant, and a different story. Because a lot of the narrative, when I look in bookshops at the moment and bookshelves, I don't see that many love stories without the addition of a lot of heavy influence of race and discrimination. Those are important stories and narratives to share. But, you know, this is just a love story that anyone could relate to. Yes, as a Black woman, I see myself with in Equia when you talk about the cocoa butter, because you know, we've used cocoa butter to moisturize our skin, so I know how beautiful that smells, so I could relate to that. But this is a story that a love story that anyone could relate to, and I think that's really great. It's nice that, you know, themes like, you know, discrimination, race are explored. Definitely we have to do more of that, but it's also nice that we are just human and we can talk about love, you know, and love stories that affect us, you know, affect everyone. So I think it's a book really that anyone could relate to.
Thank you. That's really nice.
So Equia's originally, she's British Ghanaian.
Yes.
Okay, and I the other thing I love is that we see glimpses of different parts of the world. We read this book in, I think it was later last year, and it was cold, it was winter when we read this book, and we were in lockdown. So this is another great book that just transports you to a different part of the world with your style of writing. I remember reading the bits where, I'm just going to jump forward, reading the bits where Equia goes to Ghana with Jay. And with some of the writing, I felt like, you know, I was in a tropical, just reading a switch where you feel you're in the tropics. And I was just amazed with the writing, so that you make the reader feel like they've taken a trip.
Yeah, I think we spoke about this the last time I was here, the book club. So thank you for inviting me back. I think I was saying that I could only, when I was writing this, I wanted to write about places that I had obviously been and how I experienced in them, just because I wanted it to be authentic, and I couldn't. I didn't feel I could convincingly write about a place I haven't actually been to, and her Akwia's journey to Ghana, and that it's not a place she had visited very often, and is very much similar to my experience. I've been only like a handful of times. I haven't been very often, to be honest. And that, for her, it was kind of like her opportunity to show someone else around, even though she was a novice as well. So I kind of wanted that to come through a bit, and to just, I remember those little bits and pieces of it that I still have a very strong sense of, that kind of sit in my memory. I'm glad that kind of came through in the book, and it was ironic that it happened to come out in the year that we had a pandemic and none of us could go anywhere, because I started it in like 2016. So that was just fortuitous seems like the wrong word, but it just happened to align at a good time when none of us can go anywhere. So I'm glad I could offer some of that, wanderlust, even if it's only in our imaginations. Yeah.
Yes, our book club definitely thanks you for the free travel. In terms of the characters, how did Akwia's character come to you? You said you started writing in 2016.
That's a good question. I was thinking about relationships, dating that I had done in my 20s, that my girlfriends had done, and it was what we talked about when we were in our 20s, and those first like big loves, the big relationships that we all expect to work out, but we're all novices, and so you're just kind of finding your feet, and it's the blind leading the blind. And I was thinking about all of those things, and I was always interested in those kinds of stories, and I wanted to, and I was thinking specifically about one of my first relationships. I will say that nothing that happens in this book is real. I want to point that out. It's not based on me at all, but the emotions come from obviously a place that I have experienced, and I have friends and family and stuff. But and I was just thinking about about that first love, that how it doesn't feel like anything else, and what is that? And I kind of wanted to explore that, and I just thought it was going to be like a little short story that I was just writing to just kind of think it through, and it ended up taking on a life of its own. But I knew that I really wanted Akwi, definitely, I knew I wanted her to be a Black woman, of Ghanaian heritage, and because of the things that some of you guys have already talked about representation, but that kind of, I hadn't read anything like that, where that featured a Ghanaian British woman at the time in which I was writing this book, or barely even like Black British women, to be honest, separate to like, outside of like Andrea Levy, and like some of the stuff she was writing years ago. Like, I think, it was, but I knew that I wanted to be very intentional with that, but that was it. Like, that was just, I wanted her to be that. And then everything that came out of that kind of came itself. But I think she's like the first iteration of the book. She was a lot more irritating than she is now, trust me. I dialed it back for the final draft. But I just thought about how you are in your 20s, where like everything is a question and you don't really know anything. So you try everything, and you kind of, if you're not very good at communicating how you feel, then you're also filling in the gaps about what you think this other person is thinking. And all of those kind of, that paranoia and a bit of that doubt and learning and change that you have to go through to kind of grow. I wanted to kind of put it all into this character. And I think I've done that. I hope I've done that. Yeah.
whilst you were talking, I was just thinking about Akwia's relationships, first with D, Emeka, and then with Jay. And I wonder, speaking about relationships as you were, whether part of the reason why she had problems with Jay was her losing, no, with D, Emeka, sorry, not with Jay, her not in that relationship, you know, being under his shadow, because he was quite charismatic.
Yes.
Just going with what you said about growing up and you know, how relationships evolve when you're young and decisions. It seemed like Akwia, who's the protagonist in the book, was very keen to please, and she would sometimes, without realizing, compromise herself slightly, in a sense. Maybe, I don't know whether compromise is too heavy a word, but she did, to make this relationship work.
Yeah, and also I think a key thing for her, which I'm always talking about with people, is the impact of her parents' relationship, and that it's very hard to have a healthy relationship if you don't have an example of what that looks like. And for her, and so she's very aware of how her parents are. They don't talk, they don't communicate, they don't have big raging fights necessarily, but they don't talk either. It's like a kind of cold silence. So she wanted the opposite of that, but then in doing that, she doesn't really know how to do that. And so I think that's where that, kind of, her motivations were always, well, what would my parents do? Let me do the opposite kind of thing, which is, it's not necessarily functional, but it does explain why she would then be like, oh, let me give all of my time to D, but then also let me be withholding. But she's basically acting out both of her parents in different ways. And I think she had to then, she had to go through those things to figure out how is she actually in a relationship? Who she actually is and what that means to her. And I think, exactly. I think it's a combination. I think it's a combination of just being young. It's a combination of watching whoever your role models are, and then trying to put that into practice in your own way.
Interesting, you mentioned role models. Oh, and by the way, if anyone wants to make a comment, please just jump in. Interesting you talk about role models, because we see in the book her parents, the book explores her relationships, but also her parents' relationships as well. And we talked about it previously with her mother at the end, with them eventually, their relationship, spoiler alert, their relationship not going as well. As well. I would say what happens, because there may be people who want to read this and I don't want to ruin it for everyone, but it's very interesting. You explore, something that's not as well talked about in our community, in the choices her mother made, where there's keeping up appearances. I think the mom stays in a relationship where she's not entirely happy, but she's there to, be a mother to her daughter, but forgets that she also is important for her to be happy. And the father's not happy as well. And it seems that he's just like D and Emeka. Their characters are quite similar. They're both very creative individuals. And somehow the mom, I felt, didn't recognize his strength. And, that portrayal of what a man I'll use in a typical African setting should be, the provider. I remember her mother was a GP, wasn't she? And she worked quite hard. Yes, it felt that she didn't, her definition of what a strong, supportive husband should be was, not quite, I would say it wasn't quite right, but it also demonstrated that they weren't as well suited, despite having Akwi and bringing her up together and doing a great job as parents. But as partners, maybe they weren't supporting each other as best as they could, or maybe they didn't understand each other as best as they could have.
Yeah, and I think the story that her mother tells towards the end of the book about how, about how she met. I'm trying not to spoil. How she met a friend via her husband, and how they all went to school together, and it was kind of that paired with a queer hearing earlier on in the book, how her dad was when they were all at school, and he was really popular. He was very they were school in Ghana, and he was the musician. He was D, essentially, and he's very popular and really confident and very, had a lot going for him. And I feel like you can see how that would be, if you're thinking about this idea of like, quote unquote, the man or the provider, this quote unquote typical African father, you can see her mother, if in her mind she's decided, I'm gonna take this route and I want to have a partner and and I want to have a family and etc. That he in that iteration would seem like a good choice because he was very confident, he was popular, and he was a go-getter, and he made things happen. So why wouldn't that translate into you as as an adult, right? As a husband, obviously we all know that's not how it worked, but you can see how then the deterioration of their marriage is they have become different people to what they both expected each other to be. And again, so I don't necessarily think that her, because she also wanted to, had an idea for her career and wanted to be, a doctor, and he has supported her throughout that, but also every now and then, this is obviously a level of resentment that he's not turned out to be what she expected. And there's a big part of her that she's closed off in exchange for him, and now she resents that decision, but that's not really his fault. And vice versa. And I think all of those things feed into then the fact that what a queer saw was just the end result of that. She doesn't know the layers that are sitting underneath it, or until later, she just gets older. But then if she's trying to model a relationship based on that, then technically it's always kind of doomed to fail. Which is sad, but also necessary. Yeah.
I was going to ask, in terms of their characters, which character did you find really difficult writing about?
Difficult. Probably Jay. And I know that might sound strange. I've had people say, like, some people love D, hate J. Love J, hate D. They're like, Jay, like the people that don't like him, like, oh, he's a bit of a wet blanket, and he's not got, he's not a challenge, which, but technically he's slightly older than D. He's a little bit more, knows who he is a bit more, and is like, has a plan for his life and is doing well, and he's very straight-laced. I mean, for argument's sake. And I found him quite difficult to write just because I found it so easy to write a queer and D and like this complicated, because I love that kind of stuff. I love a complicated relationship. Like I'm very reading about it, not being in one. But I like that, what goes into the intricacies of creating that kind of story. And Jay is like he's like an anomaly outside of that. He's not here for any, he doesn't play games. He's just like very straight down the line. And I kept trying to make him complicated, and it just wasn't taking. Like the character wanted to go in a different direction. He didn't want to be that. So I found that quite hard to just make him quite reasonable and not erratic. And even when things happened, I'm trying not to spoil, things turned out the way they did, there's no point where he acts insane or he does something completely like unexpected. He's just, and that was quite I find that hilariously difficult to do, which says more about me than it does about the character.
I was
I
going to
was
ask
wondering.
this. Sorry, Peter, go ahead.
No, sorry, I was just going to ask about the title, Bad Love, because I found it very easy to read. It was free-flowing and very nuanced, because none of the characters did anything tragically bad or to cause the end of all of the relationships, even the parents. So it felt very nuanced and carefully written, rather. And so when the book title is Bad Love, you sort of think, why is it called that? Like, it feels slightly deeper. Like, is it what someone ponders in their way to learning what love is? Because not even the parents' relationship seemed that bad, because they found out, depending on how you see it.
Yeah.
But yes.
I mean,
You know, so exactly.
That's kind of right. That it's the same reason I didn't call it Bad Relationships. Basically, it's more. It was the name. I think. I mean, the name came very early on, and I think it just came out of. It came out of what people's. I think what each character's like idea of what love is, and this is kind of, they made this association between. Or it'd be easy to make the association to say love is bad because I had a bad relation, I had a bad experience with it. But actually, I guess I'm asking the question: is love bad, or is it just your experience of it? And so I think it kind of came out of that. I mean, the name just came, and then later on, I was thinking about these things. But yeah, it's less about here's an example of all these terrible relationships, and more. Here's an example of the different and intricate ways in which people can approach love quite badly, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think it was a bit more nuanced, I hope.
You know, it's totally, it totally does. I mean, and I really appreciate the fact that the book exists, because it's very easy to find stories that have tragic breakups with cheating, domestic abuse, but it's very nuanced, and it widens that whole experience of Black love, and also just relationships in Black communities.
I'm glad.
Maame, I like the cover of the book.
Oh, thank you.
Do you get a say in the cover? I wasn't sure, or
yes,
or did you tell somebody the story and they came up with it?
Essentially, yeah. So basically, the cover is an illustration by a very good friend of mine, Dr Adeyemi. And he's a he's a children's book illustrator. Yeah, and now an author. He's so good. And basically, this image was something that he painted, I think, a handful of years ago. And what happened was he'd done a series of images in this same style, and he posted them on Instagram or something. And we were talking, and I said to him, I'm gonna steal this for something one day. And he was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then when I found out my book was being published, Jacaranda, because they're a small press, we did have a lot of really good say in how the books looked and that kind of thing. And they said, if you have an inspiration for something that you want the cover to be like, send it to us and we can kind of try to do that. And then I asked him, can I have this? And he was like, I'll rework it for you, and you can have it. And so he reworked the image for me with this like new color palette and everything. And I said to them, oh, my friend, he's an illustrator, and his book had already come out. And I was like, it's real, it's not just my mate, please, let him do the cover. And they saw it and they loved it. And they were like, yeah, of course. And so because of, as soon as I saw the image, it just worked so perfectly with the story. It was like, it was like a weird kind of symbiosis. So I'm very fortunate I got to actually choose what the cover looked like. Yeah.
Can I also just say that, the opening of the book, it's what got me. That first line about not being a romantic. I must have, because I've read other romances, and they've not grabbed me in the same way, but it was just that first line. I was thinking, I need to take a look at this. So and the title Bad Love, you know, Peter was saying why the title. I kind of get the impression that bad love, good love, there's a blurred line there, isn't there? You know,
Yes.
So yeah, so it's very brilliant. Oh, hello, baby.
Thank you.
Patricia's psychic, because I was going to ask the same thing or make just comments about the, you know, the opening of the book.
About the, yes, I mean, yeah, I don't, I am very proud with how I opened it. I think probably that because when I was writing it, because I didn't think about this as a romance book, because it doesn't, as you said, Patricia, it doesn't, as you've read others, it doesn't follow the, what's it, the genre of romance. It has a very set kind of guideline. If you're talking strict romance, which is, it has to have certain markers, and then has to have an happy ending. There's actually like two characters must end up together if you're doing strict romance. Not to ruin this book, but I don't think it has an unhappy ending, but it's my opinion. But yeah, it doesn't. I thought of it as an anti-romance because I knew it wasn't going to do anything like what other romance books usually are supposed to do. And I think maybe that might have been why I started with that line to set it clear, so like she's not a romantic person. And I'm really glad that kind of has hooked people and made them want to read it. Yeah.
I've got a comment, Maame, just to commend you on. Sorry, I thought I was muted. Okay, no, just to commend you on the sort of the character growth and resilience that you show in Ekua, because I have read books of other young women her age who are in other bad relationship settings, and everything else seems to fall apart. But then if you look at her growth, because we see her throughout university and then into her career and then into, you know, she still, there's certain parts of her life that she still holds really together. I mean, you guys, the book club would know the book we all read last week, and I was just pulling my hair out compared to how I see Ekua's character. I am really like, it's not just a book about love or relationships. I think it would also teach a young person, precisely a young woman, how to still manage certain parts of your life, even if everything else around your love is falling apart. I just want to commend that writing. Looking back now, I'm like, wow, okay, Ekua has it together, you know. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. I mean, I do think, yeah, I just think because no one is one thing. And I think we, in reality, like, yes, like that first heartbreak, whatever it is, I think it does feel like the world's ending, but yeah, we all know that we still carry on, even if we feel like the world is ending, because not many of us have the luxury to just stay in bed and not do anything and not guess what, come on. Like, yeah. I think, and actually I felt like, and also I felt because of the way that her parents are, specifically her mother, who is kind of, you know, there's a pressure there. And I think in times like that, even it's a double-edged sword, because obviously on the one hand, it can feel like pressure and stress and pressure to succeed in however her parents want her to. But the other side of it is it's something for her to lean on when she feels like something else is, when she feels like something else is kind of broken, you know? Yeah, and so I think I wanted to show that she was multifaceted. Yeah, I wanted to show that there were multiple sides, even though she's young.
It did come across really nicely.
Thank you. I'm glad.
I still feel that they ought to be a sequel, because I keep saying, dear Mecca, how could you behave in that way? I remember reading it and feeling really frustrated with him and then with Ekua. Like, both of you really like each other, you know, can you let go of these, you know, ego fronting and, you know, get together and make the relationship work. And then somehow it ends, and then Jay comes along, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe this time. And Jay is just, as you say, straight, this is me, take me as I am. You know, you're either in or out. We're either together or we're not together. I was like, oh, Jay, be kind. And then, so I kind of feel there's or maybe I'm asking, is there a sequel?
If there is a sequel to Bad Love, somebody else is writing it, unfortunately. I'm sorry. You can leave it to your imagination. Yeah, no, it's like a snapshot in time. If you think about it like that. The story's not over, it's just happening somewhere else.
Mary, I don't want them to get together. I don't want her to get together with Dee. I don't want her to get together with Jay. I don't want her to be either of them.
Patricia, what is it with Dee that you didn't sort of take to? Was he too smooth, too much of a smooth operator?
That I didn't like. And then ego, as you said, he much like dad, because her dad wasn't the stereotypical African father, was he? And she and I just think that if she got together with him, it's almost like she's replicating her parents' relationship in a way. So I don't want her to be with him either. I did like Jay because I don't like hassle. I look straight down the line, but I didn't want her to be with him either. I just wanted her to live her life a bit more before she settled down with either a D or either a J.
It's also interesting to see how the mother's own love, because reading the book and then seeing how the mother, you know, she seems like that strong character, pressure on her daughter, and you would think she's like this straight mom, and she's got her principles and her rules and all that. And then in the end, like, okay, she's ended up with her. Okay, that's an interesting twist to the book. So it's also interesting to see the mother's own kind of love, if I might want to say. And yeah, so looking at the book, I think everybody kind of had their own difficult love. Like you said, it's bad love, but in the end, it's like it actually depends on how you want to look at it. Because I think the father also found his own love. He was able to discover what he really wanted to be. And in a way, even though the relationship between father and mother was not so pleasant, but I think he still had a very important role in her own life. Because she kind of, like you rightly said, mirrored the men that were in her life, like in the life of her own father. And I think a lot of people see that to women, isn't it? That daughters tend to either fall in love with people that have characters of their fathers. I don't know how true that is. But
I think it's never as straight laced as that. It's more, I think we all inevitably gravitate to elements of people that have elements of our parents or
exactly.
guardians.
So I found it very interesting. It's a book that you want to keep on flipping the pages to see what actually happens. It's an easy read. Probably dear Mecca behave like, well, I don't know his name. Let me not say what I want to say.
Okay, it's not real.
I know,
it's
so
fine.
let me just
Yeah, you're not the first person to say that to me.
Yeah, so I'm sure like some Nigerian people reading it will know, okay, yeah, no, that's all right. We know how they roll. But, yeah, so
do you not think her dad would have behaved like that if the mother hadn't married him?
Maybe he might have. I think that's a really good point actually. I thought about that. Yeah. Probably. Probably especially because he was very much, you know, he's very much like man about town and but equally I think the thing about her father is he was he's also very loyal. And I think that, at least to her mother, I think even towards the end, like he never wanted to badmouth her or have a queer look at her differently because of the choices that she was making for her own happiness. And I think he knew that he couldn't be what she needed, but I think at least the way that a queer kind of received her father as he's like getting more successful and doing more of his music and stuff, that for the first time he was being a bit selfish, and it sounds like he hasn't really been that really during his marriage, and she didn't like that side of him. She's used to him kowtowing to her mom, but actually I think that says a lot about how loyal he was to her mother, in a way that perhaps Dee does not have the capacity to be, at least not at the age of which they are at. I think Dee wanted those things, but I don't think he knew how to do that. Not really. I haven't complicated it all in your minds more.
Yeah, but I love what you said about the thinking about the two of them getting together, Dee Emeka and Ekwe, you know, with Dee Emeka being a Nigerian man. And I was thinking, Ekwe, are you sure about this?
Poor Niger men. They get so much bad rap. The thing is,
I shouldn't be giving the brothers any.
Well, I will say, because I think the thing is, a lot of the feedback I got about the book is, I'm just looking at it over here, is a lot of people felt like they feel he's very familiar and like they recognize him. But equally that, because a queer is the narrator and she's not reliable at all. Like, so how the filter through which she sees things is not necessary. It doesn't mean it's the truth. I think she believes a lot of these things about Dee, but because they're not communicating, she's projecting a lot of things onto him and vice versa. But actually all we're getting is her idea of him. Whether that is actually how he is in the fullness, how he actually feels, I think you don't get that until the end. Because that's when she's actually allowing him to be himself, without trying to second guess what's going to happen next. So I think that's important to keep in mind. Yeah.
As you rightly say, in any relationship, communication is key. And I suppose that's why this book is, you know, speaks a language that's universal. Anyone really in any part of the world could relate to what Dee and Ekwe were experiencing in the early days of their relationship. This book takes us to Venice as well. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, it's a place I love very much. I wish I could go back at some point. But I chose it because I said, you know, one of the places that I have a strong, I just had such a nice experience in, and kind of, and it felt like I felt like I knew I wanted her to travel, because I think whether you're in your 20s, 40s, 50s, whatever, it doesn't matter. I think going to a new place, a new environment always brings out other sides of ourselves, like, and you get to see a different version of yourself in a different setting. I think it's a good way to kind of get to know yourself a little bit better. And because she's going through this transition of just getting older, I think it felt like a very poignant time for her to go and be somewhere completely different. And let's see how you fare in that environment instead. And because she's in this relationship with Dee at that time, but she doesn't even tell him she's going. And I think that I wanted there to be some kind of something that happens separate to him, to kind of show her a point of comparison early on in the relationship. Yeah.
I know we've mentioned Mum and Jeannie's story. What would be great, if you're up for it, Maame, is to write the backstory of Mum and Jeannie's relationship.
Yes, I have also had this request. I'm not gonna say no. Because a lot of people are interested in that, like that story, which I think it. I mean, I think it is interesting as well, and I think I included it, or I mean, I can't even say that I sat down and said, oh, it's gonna be this and this, because I don't really write like that. It's more like I'll start with an idea and then let's see where it goes, and it felt like the story was just taking me in that direction. Where this was the kind of branch off for her character, for the queer's mother's character. And I think as the more I was writing it, that was really fun to write, to be honest. Like I really enjoyed writing those parts, because it was like you got to see this other side of this character who seems quite rigid and strict, and and actually, like everyone, there's a whole other side of her life that there's no reason why a queer would know anything about that, because it happened before she existed. And it's based on the choices that her mother made before she was born, that have now come back, to kind of face her again. And I think I wanted to show this other side of her mother as well, that was like perhaps a bit of an explanation as to why she couldn't be that way with her husband. Because another big part of her heart was somewhere else, and that has an impact on the kind of person she is as well, and maybe why she was so kind of stony as well, because there's a bit that she was shutting off. And I think I wanted her to have something as well that was like just hers, because the queer's father had his music and he was discovering that, and that was kind of bringing him out more. And for her mother, it was Jeannie. And I think, I've had a lot of people are interested in like what the backstory is between them. I'm not going to say no, but I'm not going to say yes either.
It would be great actually, because we could go back to Ghana with lots of flashbacks.
Yes.
Maybe we could call it Before Bad Love.
I love it. I feel like one of you guys can write it. I just like try.
No, I think that would make a really good book, as you can see, Maame. So many of us really want to know what happens, in medical school. They met in medical school, didn't they? Yeah.
No, they met in Ghana.
Oh, they met
at school, in Ghana at school.
Oh,
yes. Like high school.
Okay, they met in high school, and she actually met this other person that becomes quite important to her husband later on. Very complex, that bit.
Yes.
Let's see how they get on. So also, I asked a little bit, sorry if anyone else wanted to comment, go ahead. I was just I know we talked about Jacaranda Books and the 2020 initiative, but I just wondered if you could tell us again about it.
So Bad Love was published as part of Jacaranda Books initiative to publish 20 Black British writers in 2020, and they put out a call in 2018, so long ago, for submissions, and it was like, and they're a publisher, but they're a small press, but for submissions, just like you don't need an agent if you're unpublished. They were just like, we just want your manuscripts if you have a manuscript. And it's very rare to have an open call from a publisher like that. Usually you have to either you have to first get an agent, submit your work to an agent, and then an agent then pitches your book to a publisher, and it's like a whole number of steps in between. So this was where there are open calls and competitions, is what I was kind of looking for. And I submitted it to them, and I had also was sending out to agents at that time. But I didn't get anything back from any agents, and then I forgot that I submitted it in 2018. And I left the book alone, I left the manuscript alone. And then I think 6 months later, I started reworking the manuscript and updating it. And then I kind of re-edited it to this basically version that you have read. And I completely forgot about that I had submitted to Jacaranda. And then it was literally a year later, in 2019, they sent me an email to say they'd chosen my book to publish, and which was insane. So yeah, so and then 2020, they despite the pandemic and no one doing any events in person, they managed to publish 20 books in 1 year, which is a lot for a small publisher. It's a lot for a publisher anyway, but for a small publisher. And so, yeah, if you can literally Google it, like Jacaranda 2020, there's 20 books, there's fiction, poetry, nonfiction, memoir. And it's like across the piece, just like an array of really, really great books. There's romance, there's like satire. There's one book, The Street Hawker's Apprentice, which is set in Nigeria, actually, by a friend of mine. And yeah, they're just really, really good books, just very different, but like a real good collection just across the kind of diaspora, which is really rare. So I feel like very, very lucky to be kind of published as part of that kind of thing. And we're all like really close now, me and the other 19 like writers. Yeah, so buy their books as well. Highly recommend. If you're looking for Black British stories, there's now a whole raft of them that came out last year.
I think the timing of your book being published was perfect because people were so ready, you know, to have these stories. So Jacaranda Books definitely got that timing right.
They did.
Does anyone else have any comments? I was just going to add something about poetry. What, because your book reads in a very poetic way. What sort of poetry do you like to read? What sort of poets would you recommend? And also, what other books? What sort of books do you like to read as well?
Oh yeah, so many books. I mean, but yeah, I do love poetry. I do love reading poetry. I used to write it long ago. I'm not very good, so that's why I don't do that anymore. But I love reading poetry, and it definitely has a big influence on how I write. That is true. I'm actually, ironically, I'm reading. This is very funny. You can't see this because of my background. Let's see if you can see it.
It's floating between.
Oh, it's floating. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'll tell you what it's called. It's called Where the Memory Was, and it is actually one of the 2020 books. It's a poetry collection by Hibak Osman.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really, really good. Some really good poetry in there, just about life and relationships and family. And you know, his book is very poetic. It's actually, I think it's poetry in prose. And I don't know if you might have talked about it already. You might have, I don't know. Derek Owusu, that reminds me.
Yes.
Have you guys read it yet?
No, we haven't.
Highly recommend. It's each chapter is like a page. It's not, but there's a lot in that one page kind of thing. It's very, and it's just like it's like little vignettes. So it's like pieces of like a story, you know, it's not like linear, but it's like one of my favorite books of the last few years. Like it's really, 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 really good. What did I read recently? Oh, and then as you guys were just talking about Children of Blood and Bone, a YA book, which I really like. There's another book that's just come out a handful of months ago. It's called Ace of Spades. Have you? Yeah. It's by Faraday Abike. I can't remember the rest of the name. If you Google Ace of Spades, you'll find it. Really, really good. I just read it. That's very much about kind of, it's like, you know, it's for young adults. So it's set in like a high school kind of setting. And she's a Black British Nigerian author, but it's a lot about like kind of race and institutional race, but it's done in a very clever way. It's like a thriller. It reads like a thriller. Very, very good. Like, just I recommend. Yeah, anyway, I could go on and on about book recommendations, you know. But yeah, that's some of the stuff I like. I like poetry that is kind of, I like short little kind of bursts of poetry. Like, I'm very into that. Yeah, like Warsan Shuri, it's like one of my favorite poets. Yeah.
Thanks for all the recommendations. There's a lot of citing of poetry in the book, with Jay having those poetry evenings. So I thought I'd have to remember to ask you about that.
Hey.
Someone's just put something in the comments.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
it.
Yeah.
Ace of Spades.
Okay, well, does anyone else have any questions or comments? Okay, well, Maame, thank you ever so much for coming along and talking to us about Bad Love. We really appreciate you spending the time with us to discuss such a great novel. We're highly recommending Bad Love in our book club, and we hope loads of our colleagues pick up this book. It's really interesting. As Iyabo said earlier, it's an easy read, it's fun, it's light, and very poetic as well in the style of writing.
Thank you. Well, I would say if any of you are also interested in writing, and specifically about complicated relationships, which is obviously, as you can see, I enjoy. I'm doing a workshop at Black Ballad, their online digital festival, I think on the 23rd of October. It's about sex and romance, and it's like a 1-hour workshop if you guys are interested. And I'm also doing one with Words of Color at the end of the year. So if any of you are interested in writing and you want to like have a go, like, yeah, come along, just let you know.
Thank you, that sounds really interesting. If you wouldn't mind sharing it with me, and we can put it on our social media, Instagram and Twitter. So
I will share it once it goes live. Yeah. I will do that. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again, Maame.
Thanks. No worries. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you everyone for sharing your thoughts and reflections. Thank you, Maame.
Take care. Bye.
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 Oh, what a great star she is. And I could see she definitely loves her poetry. That's why the book's written in the way that it is. I totally agree with what you were saying, Patricia. The backstory is really interesting, and I wish that was stretched a bit more. But maybe we've convinced her to do a sequel to Bad Love.
I'd love that story. And as I was reading it, I was thinking, right, why don't I know something more about the parents' relation, you know, not the parents, Jeannie's relation, Jeannie and the mum's relationship. That just would have fascinated me more. So not me more, it wouldn't fascinate me more, but I would be interested in it as well. But yeah, I love that.
Really nicely done.
I also like the fact that it wasn't cliched.
Did you read what Lara said?
Yes, Lara.
Lara, we've tried really hard. We're going to have to write a book. You know Toni Morrison's quote, if there's a book you really want to read, you might be the one to write it. And I think we've got to jump on it and finish the book, because this is the second time we've had this conversation with the book needing this, you know, something to bring the story together. We want to know what happened with the mother, and I think she's going to leave us on this cliffhanger. Yeah, she's not buying it.
I was just saying, I didn't like that. I'm glad it wasn't a cliched romance novel. So that's what I liked about it, because you know, fantasy is not my genre, but romance is neither my genre either. But this was very different. But it's a lovely read, really lovely. I think it would also make a great summer holiday read as well. It's very light, and it's very easy to get through. So I mean, I know you read it last year, and I wasn't with the club last year, but had you read it this summer, I probably would have really enjoyed it as well, rather than the other book.
Yeah. No, it was a book that after we read it and had a discussion, everyone had, you know, something to share. The characters are so relatable, and they feel very real. And the book itself is very contemporary. It's lovely to have a book that starts off in London, goes off to Venice, and then Ghana as well. Very good read. Okay, I shall stop recording if I can. Bear with me a second.
Are we going to vote on it?
We did already.
Oh, did you? Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
We?
Oh.
No,
when we reviewed it last time.
We didn't actually, because the author was there, and I kind of feel a bit rude. Who do we have? Do we have Lara and Patricia? Yeah, so, you know, I wasn't sure if the girls were going to say two. No, I'm only kidding. So should we vote on it? Yes.
Before we vote, can I just ask, has anybody read Mr. Loverman by Bernardine Evaristo? I kind of had that thought going through my mind as I was reading the parent, you know, Jeannie and Mum's story. I didn't want to say that whilst the author was there, but that was the thought that was running through my mind as well. So,
yeah.
Okay. Sorry, we can vote.
That's a great book, actually. If we didn't have a Sky High to be read list, that would be further up our list. It's a good book. Okay, I would say, to be honest, it made for really great discussion in our book club. Everyone who was commenting had something to say about it. It was an easy read. Sorry, I just need to put someone on mute for a second. I'm not sure. Yeah, they've done it themselves. Yes, it was a really great read. So I would say 4.5. 4.55.
Four for me.
4 for me as well.
I started with 3.5 because I found the characters really frustrating, but then the fact that they stuck with me and I kept thinking about it even afterwards, I was like, okay, fine, actually, that's how they're written, so I give it a 4.
I'd give it a 4.5. Before we read Queenie, I would have given it like a 4. But I just kind of now contrasting how two similar characters progressed dealing with, you know, their different relationship dramas. I think she did a good job with Ikea, so I like the book. I'll give it a 4.5.
Yay. Yeah, a great one. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone, for sharing your thoughts, reflections on some of the books we've read over the past year. We talked about Children of Blood and Bone, a really great book. I believe we gave that somewhere between a 4-5 star. And we've just talked about Bad Love with the author Maame Blue, and we've given that somewhere between a 4 and 5 star as well. So both great books that we really recommend you to pick up if you can. Thank you all. Hopefully we'll see you next Sunday, same time between 5 and 7, and we'll be discussing some new books, and we'll have another author join us next week. Thank you.